why did Jesus die? And if he really was the Son of God, why did he allow himself to die? Why not use all that power to protect himself and his followers and to establish a good earthly kingdom? That was, in fact, what his disciples expected him to do. Now that he was openly declaring himself to be the Messiah, they expected him to go into Jerusalem and to destroy God's enemies and to kick out the hated Romans. Life under Roman rule was hard. Soldiers took what they wanted. Tax collectors took what they wanted. And a Roman soldier could throw down their things and force a Jewish person to carry them a mile. And so many Jews had a mile marker in every direction from their home, so that they knew exactly how far they had to carry their things, because no one likes being a slave. Now 3 times Jesus told his disciples that he was going into Jerusalem, and there he would suffer at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he would be killed, and 3 days later he would rise from the dead. The first time that Jesus told his disciples that he was going to die was in Caesarea Philippi, where Peter made the great confession that Jesus was the Christ. But when Jesus made this confession that he was the Christ, that he was the Messiah, and told his disciples that he was going into Jerusalem to die, Peter took him aside and started rebuking him, telling him, "Lord, may this never be." Peter could not contemplate a Messiah who would have to die. And Jesus had to take Peter aside and rebuke him. And he told him, "You do not have in mind the things of God, but mere human concerns." The second time Jesus told his disciples that he was going to Jerusalem to die, they were understandably sad. But the third time that Jesus tells his disciples, the response from the disciples is really quite unbelievable. James and John, 2 of Jesus' disciples, go with their mother, and she asks on their behalf for Jesus to give to the disciples, to give to her sons, the right and left hand of power when Jesus came into his kingdom. Now, when the other disciples hear about this, they are indignant, probably because they didn't think of this first. And so Jesus knows that the disciples have in mind the wrong kind of Messiah, the wrong kind of kingdom, and the wrong kind of leaders in his kingdom. And so Jesus calls together the disciples and he tells them what true greatness is all about. Jesus said, "You know that the Gentiles rule over people. You know that the high officials exercise their authority over others." They knew what that was like. Jesus said, "Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be a servant, and whoever wants to be first must be a slave. For," he said, "the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many." Even Jesus, though he was the Messiah, did not use his power and authority to force others to do his will. Instead, he would use his power and authority to love and serve others. Ever since sin entered into the Garden of Eden, our world and all of humanity has suffered from sin and the slavery that it brings. We see it in the constant wars, racial division, violence, and destructive acts of nature. We have probably experienced it through the brokenness in relationships, abuse, addiction, loneliness, the emptiness of materialism. This sin enslaves us, destroying our relationships with God and others. We desperately need to be freed from sin and its slavery. And this freedom requires a ransom, a sacrifice. A ransom is the price that is required to free someone from slavery. And the ransom that was required to free us from sin and the slavery that it brings was the death of Jesus Christ. There's a story of a young girl named Liz who is suffering from a rare and serious disease. And her only hope of survival was receiving a blood transfusion from her 5-year-old brother, who had also contracted the disease and who had somehow survived and had developed antibodies against this disease. And as the doctor went in and explained to the little boy what was required in order for his sister to live, the boy hesitated for a moment, but then said, "If it will save her, I will do it." And as they went into the hospital, side by side, and the little boy saw the color return to his sister's face as the blood flowed into her veins, he began to smile. But then the smile began to fade. And trembling, he looked up at the doctor and he said, "Will I die right away, or will it be a little while?" The boy had misunderstood what was required from him. He thought that he had to give all of his blood in order for his sister to survive. Jesus Christ willingly gave his life and gave his blood and sacrificed for us so that we might live, so that we might have redemption. So how about you? What is it that you want to be freed from in your life? What do you need to be redeemed from? And what does redemption look like for you?